First of all, can the brain be free of the center which is me? You understand me? Can my brain be free of myself, the self? Whether that self is super self, ultra super, is still the self. Is there total dissipation of selfishness, to put it very simply? Selfishness, the self-center, is very cunning. It can think it is escaped from all selfishness, from all concern about its own entity, its own becoming, and yet very subtly, deeply is putting out a tentacle. You understand all this? So one has to discover for oneself whether there can be complete and total freedom from all selfishness, which is all self-centered activity. Right? That is meditation.
Neutrality, or the narrow gate, does not constitute the absence of action. Instead, it brings one into formulation with actions that are based upon unity instead of division. It is nearly impossible to discern, but every action outside of the narrow way is automatically derived from a divided state, and at once repeals energy. The concern for the moment, however, is not with the accumulation or loss of physical vigor, but with the framework of the mind and the dichotomy to which it is subjected to on a daily basis. It is from this framework that every major problem of the human species is constituted from, and to which it owes its conclusions. The greatest misconception is that neutrality means that one does nothing. Neutrality actually means approaching all action without prejudice, and all of the formulations of judgment and personal egotism of the past. What does that mean exactly? In simple terms, it means an action that does not involve any idea of the self, or the me. It is an action that is sourced from an undivided mind. For the majority of the species, this is where the filters are turned on to 100%, and everything from this point is ignored or ridiculed. It has been this way through the countless ages. Who is ready or willing to even consider letting go of the entire schematic of that which has been built over years into what is called the me? This is not physical self-destruction that is being talked about, and it is not the termination of the mind itself. That is nihilism, which is the most extreme form of dualism. What is being talked about here is the cessation of all the built-up concepts, ideas, and belief systems that surround the mind and create barriers against the truth by coloring it with lies and innuendo. It has always been easier to live with a comfortable lie than with a disturbing truth, at least for a while. Even comfort will eventually give way to a more dissatisfying form of unease that even physical or material excess cannot alleviate. This dis-ease needs to be addressed, and the discomfort which it brings is becoming more obvious to many with each passing day. The self, in metaphorical terms, is like a freight train that is carrying many cargo loads of baggage, which are all prejudicial. And from these prejudicial ideas, symbols, judgments, fantasies, hatreds, dogmas, etc., are the means through which actions take place. As one gains a clearer conception of all these personalized perspectives through life, the baggage becomes more deeply rooted through experiences, emotions, and the repeated mantras that are looped like a record in the mind each day. With all of that excess baggage, there cannot be clarity, and therefore there cannot be an approach or an action that is taken without the individual's projection of all their prejudices. Can there be a cessation to conflict when every single individual is trying to project their version of reality onto every other individual within their own vicinity or beyond? When one portrays themselves as being from one nation, either an American, a Jamaican, a Mexican, a Russian, or any other example, are each of these people going to see anyone else through the eyes of clarity and neutrality, or is it just going to be so much prejudice and division? The moment that one identifies themselves with a nation, a class, caste, or religion, then all other versions of those systems are seen as enemies, or at the very least, outsiders that are deemed less worthy. This creates an artifice in the mind that is used against everyone else who is not a part of the organization that one has enfolded themselves into. This further creates an area in the mind that can be called artificial security. These identifiers mean that any action is taken from an automatic point of view that is self-justified, which is why the politicians can use this tactic against the populace of an area, that anyone who is not an American, for example, can be declared a terrorist.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy. There's no in between. You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear.
The more prejudice that has been built up in the population, the easier the tactic is to use. How much difference is there in the approach to all actions taken every day based upon things like race, color, religious denomination, gender, class distinction, social status, and nationalism? How many problems do each of these actions cause? All are based upon a prejudicial mind that is stuck in the belief of duality. Us versus them. You versus me. Can anyone be seen in the light of truth if there is already so much judgment towards them? The mind wants to scream against this, yet who is right when every single person believes themselves to be right? Who? The one with the most firepower? Is truth a test of strength and armaments? Is it simply the majority of people who hold one particular prejudicial belief or system and use the words ours or we? Is that where an undivided truth is going to be found, where action does not lead to conflict? Is it those who scream the loudest, get the most angry, or hurl the most insults? Is it those who give the most thumbs down, or the most thumbs up? Is the truth without conflict just around the corner from any of these concepts? Can anyone truly see a woman if they bring along so many preconceived notions about what women are like, their behaviors, mentality, fears, nuances, social status, and so on? Can anyone truly see a man if they bring along so much of the same? Is the Russian going to truly see someone if they've already labeled them as a Chinese person? Is the Australian going to truly see someone that they've already labeled as a Filipino? Is anyone going to truly see themselves when they've already attached one of these nationalistic symbols onto their own mentality? The observational truth is that there is no Chinese person or Russian person or American person and so on. There are no communists, socialists, Christians, Buddhists, leftists, right-wingers, Democrats, Westerners, Easterners, separatists, or conformists. These are just prejudicial identifiers that the mind is subjugated into believing, which creates another powerful form of bias that gives another buffer of artificial security to a mind that is terrified of having to stand on its own. In this security, there is fear, and the offspring of that fear is hatred. There truly is a crisis going on in the world, but it is not a political problem, or one in which taking down the elite or major corporations will entirely solve the dilemma. The crisis is inside every one of us, and the more the fight is taken outside of our own consciousness, the more that the crisis will grow and fester. Without a fundamental and radical change in the entire approach to our individual minds, there can be no change. It will all be temporary and artificial. An attack against the symptoms and not against the root can only create displacement. A displaced elite would simply be replaced by other individuals of the human species, and the major corporations being thwarted would continue their expansion through the minds of those who are young and have been trained like the majority of the world, to be ambitious and filled with competitiveness, greed, and contempt for their fellow man. New major corporations doing obscene damage would spring up because the same minds that gave them their power in the first place have done nothing to change their own conscious behavior and therefore actions. The ones who assert that religion will save us simply bring their own divided reality into their actions. The claim of heaven as a prize and a savior's belief, and the threat of a sinner's hell as its punishment for doubt, is the song sheet of ultimate dualism, seemingly scored by the hands of Tantalus himself. Thousands of denominations in each religion already show us the future of what would happen if everyone was converted into one religion. The fight would be whose version of that one version would be the correct one. Politics is the same, and ideas of grandeur involving that greatest religion called money are no better. All divide and conquer, based upon individualistic premises that are biased and partial towards each presenter's particular viewpoints and pre-formulated assessments. The question is then, can an action be accomplished that is from a clean slate, so to speak? An action where the individual brings no bias to the forefront of their mind and approaches everything from a state of purity. If one wants to bring heaven to their experience, they cannot draw up a plan of action by rummaging through the trash bin.
There's never nothing going on if you're looking with a clear mind. Start with the past, Dan. Understand something. There's nothing you can do to change it. The past is completely out of your control. You're up on the rings and you think to yourself, the last time I didn't do so good. The past now has all your attention and concentration. So, throw it out. The same with the future. Gee, I really hope I ace my dismount. I really hope Joy and I get together. The future now has your concentration. You see? So throw it out. Take out the trash, Dan. The trash is anything that is keeping you from the only thing that matters. This moment. Here and now. And when you truly are in the here and now, you'll be amazed at what you can do and how well you can do it.
Would heaven have trash? So if heaven is pure, and one would like to see heaven, and the state from which this can be produced is an action that is constituted from the mind, can the mind then be unclean? Can the mind initiate any action from a state of impurity to arrive at something which is pure? Or can this only breed more waste? Should one then not handle with the utmost care what goes into the mind, since every mental seed planted can eventually grow into a forest of actionable consciousness? Who is the one that remains accountable for the content that has been taken in? If each of us is the emperor of our own domain, should the answer not be obvious? Neutrality closes the divide and brings the narrow gate into focus, and it is from this vantage point as the witness where one can simply see what is. In this state, there cannot be argument, only a point of trust in which the observer has become the observed. The two sides are not separate, which means that there is agreement towards all action. In fact, to say that there are two sides is no longer accurate, because the sides are erased. When the sides have been erased and the clarity of truth comes forth, would you then go to war with yourself? Would you then not feed yourself if you were hungry? Would you then treat yourself with contempt? Would you then compete and steal from yourself? Would you then show anger and enmity towards yourself? Would you show nationalistic hatred towards yourself? Would you tell yourself you're going to hell for not believing in a symbol? Would you then ignore yourself? What else are we all doing? In a world of crisis, what else are we all doing?
So what am I to do? First of all, can the brain be free of the center which is me? You understand my? Can my brain be free of myself, the self? Whether that self is super self, ultra super, is still the self. Is there total dissipation of selfishness, to put it very simply? Selfishness, the self-center, is very cunning. It can think it is escaped from all selfishness, from all concern about its own entity, its own becoming, and yet very subtly, deeply is putting out a tentacle. You understand all this? So One has to discover for oneself whether there can be complete and total freedom from all selfishness, which is all self-centered activity. Right? That is meditation.